Truth Unveiled here, and today I have so much to go over with you. I'm going to be talking about the recent earthquakes that have been going on, and the question of the day is, what are they getting ready for? Why so many earthquakes, and why could it potentially trigger tsunamis and volcanic eruptions and other bad things? So that and more to come. But I'm here at Asia Times, and we're going to be discussing Japan and earthquakes, a quick study guide, because what you're going to see are some very interesting things that have been going on. But it says Japan, Ecuador, and Tonga were next in the Ring of Fire, so-called. And it said that the Ring of Fire is here, this imaginary horseshoe-shaped zone that follows the rim of the Pacific Ocean where many of the world's earthquakes and volcanic eruptions occur. I wonder why, but it says, what is the Pacific Ring of Fire? Called the biggest crash seen on Earth. These boundaries mark the collision between two of the plane's tectonic plates. These plates are pieces of crust that slowly move across the plane surface over millions of years. That's what they want us to believe. But let's keep going. What does it do? It's responsible for the world's biggest earthquakes, the most terrible tsunamis, and some of the worst volcanic eruptions, according to Live Science. Within the Ring of Fire, several tectonic plates, including the Pacific Plate beneath the Pacific Ocean and the Philippine Sea Plate, mash and collide. It is the most active quake belt where tons of earthquakes occur. You're going to see that in a minute. But also what's interesting is that 6 massive quakes in less than 4 days. So Thursday we saw a 6.5 magnitude in Japan, Saturday a 7.3 in Japan, Saturday again at 5.8 in Japan, and then 5.3 in Japan. And then on Sunday we see one in Ecuador, 7.8, which we're going to go over later, and then again in Tonga, a 5.8 as well. But there's a lot they're not telling you about these earthquakes and how they're happening and who is behind them. You're going to find out who just a second. But it says 4 massive earthquakes struck Japan in less than 3 days this week. The strongest measured 7.3 on the Richter scale early Saturday. Massive damage to roads, bridges, and buildings were reported. The death toll by Saturday's end reached 41 as rescuers struggled to reach survivors. Thousands sustained serious injuries, with about 90,000 evacuated from the quake-hit southern regions and admitted to emergency shelters. Warning calls have been issued to brace for more severe tremblers in the coming days. And what else would happen? The quakes also appear to have triggered eruption at Mount Aso, Japan's largest active volcano. A tsunami warning was sounded but lifted a few hours later. And I know there was a tsunami warning in Ecuador as well, which we're going to go over that, as well as Mount Aso as well. So one has to wonder, why is all this occurring at such a time as this? Still think everything's okay? I suggest you wake up and think again. But it goes on to say, why is Japan battered so often by earthquakes? Why hasn't the Mount Aso eruption triggered a tsunami? What are the relationships between Japan's geographic location, earthquakes, and tsunamis? The following report answers some of these questions. Some of them, not all of them, because they're not going to tell you the real truth about what HARP and CERN and how your government is the one doing all this, planning all this, and staging all this to begin with. I did a series on the Illuminati card game and how they predicted Fukushima. Not only that, but they even show you on those cards what staged earthquakes. But if you still don't believe that, our government has documentation admitting cloud seeding and other things that they do to manipulate and control the weather for staged droughts and staged earthquakes in strategic locations. But they don't want you to know that. But it goes on to say, it talks about the geologists and what they call the Ring of Fire, or the subduction zone. I wonder why they call it the Ring of Fire. Very interesting and suspicious indeed. But it goes on to say, within the Ring of Fire, several tectonic plates, including the Pacific Plate beneath the Pacific Ocean and the Philippine Sea Plate, mash and collide. That's what they want us to believe. But what does it do? What does this Ring of Fire, and what does it say to do? It creates the biggest earthquakes, the most terrible tsunamis, and some of the worst volcanic eruptions. It's only a matter of time until all of that hits America at the same time, simultaneously, and I hope you are ready for that. Of course, it says not all earthquakes trigger tsunamis, but it's the most active earthquake belt in the world. What is the Pacific Ring of Fire? And like I said, why would they even deem it with a name like that to begin with? And we're actually going to go to the U.S. Geological Survey later on to talk more about it. But of course, it talks more about the earthquake itself. But Like I said, you need to see the bigger agenda and just what they're getting ready for. Because if you don't think they're bringing this to America, if you don't think they're testing all this and getting it ready for America, I suggest you think again. Now I'm here at TRT and it talks more about the Ring of Fire, which goes on in the Pacific and how it threatens countries. Remember, problem, reaction, solution. That should be going on in your head and ringing some serious alarm bells because so much has happened this week. But it goes on to say earthquakes around the what? Ring of Fire, which is what? The horseshoe-like area of the Pacific with the string of volcanoes and sites of seismic activity are increasing in the Pacific Ocean. Almost 90% of all earthquakes are seen along the Ring of Fire, and the ring is dotted with 75% of all active volcanoes from around the world. And like I said, I'm going to take you to USGS later, where there have been reported over 1,000 earthquakes around this area in the past week alone total. But let's keep going. A transform boundary is created when tectonic plates slide horizontally past each other. As parts of these plates get jammed with contact pressure, they build up and cause natural disasters. Oh, but don't forget about Harp and CERN and how they play a role in this too, and how the elite and the Zionists play a role in this as well, because they love to forget that part. But let's keep going. It says between April 1st and April 16th, 16 earthquakes with magnitude 6 or higher have struck the Pacific Belt. That should be ringing some serious alarm bells. If you still think, oh, everything's fine, nothing to worry about here, oh, that's just a coincidence, we don't need to worry, I suggest you think again. I'm not saying literally worry. I'm telling you to wake up if you're not already awoke. But of course, we saw a big earthquake that hit Ecuador on April 16th, the magnitude 7.8. We also see, of course, with Japan on April 15th, a quake with the magnitude of 7.0 hit there, as well as another one that hit on April 14th, but let's keep going. We saw one in Tonga with the 6.1 earthquake that was recorded on April 17th. There was a 6.1 earthquake reported in Guatemala, and then Vanuatu also was reported with the 6.4 earthquake on April 14th. And the list just goes on. And of course, there was also one in Alaska reported as a 6.2 earlier this month on April 2nd. And then Papua New Guinea as well. There was one on a 6.2 earthquake on April 1st and April 6th. A magnitude 6.0 earthquake on April 13th. 6.9 in Myanmar or Burma. Why all of these earthquakes and why are they upticking? Why all of a sudden? Why in the same area? Why is it deemed the Ring of Fire? What exactly are they getting ready for? Remember what I said, nothing is ever a coincidence. Nothing just happens. Nothing is ever a coincidence. The fact that they would have not one, not two, not three, not four, but over 5 earthquakes at 6.0 plus within the past week or so, that should be ringing some serious alarm bells, and not one, not two, but well over 3 to 4 different nations, triggering what? Tsunamis and possible tsunamis and even earthquakes as recorded in Japan. Very interesting and suspicious indeed. But this article from Telesur reports on Tonga and the earthquake that was reported there, the 6.1 earthquake that hit there. Of course, there were no reports of victims or damages done. It said the quake hit southeast at the capital, near the capital, in the area in the South Pacific Ocean around Tonga is one of the most earthquake active regions of the world. And what is it called, or what do they deem it? They deem it what? The Ring of Fire. Why would they deem it that? Very interesting and suspicious indeed. But like I said, what does this have to do? Problem, reaction, solution. What does your government do? Your lovely government, whether you want to believe it or not, they stage earthquakes in strategic locations with HARP and CERN. They know exactly where they're going to hit, when they're going to hit. And like I said, they're testing all of this out for chaos and destruction. It's only a matter of time until they bring it to America. And they test earthquakes to see in strategic locations, to see if certain volcanoes could go off, to see if certain tsunamis can go off, to see the emergency response time, to see how long it could take them to get the troops in, and for America to see how long they could get FEMA in. Remember, they test everything out before they do it. Like, for example, the economic collapse, which I've been reporting the past week, they've been testing it in Europe all over. They've been testing power power outages all over not only Syria and Crimea, but also Venezuela. And you don't think they're testing this too? Of course they are. They're getting ready. Problem, reaction, solution to see the response time to see when they can impose martial law in America once they start doing this stuff in America. It's not a matter of if, but when. Like I said, there's just too much going on, and there's too much going on around the world, and too many warning signs for you to ignore. And here I am at NBC, our favorite, and no, I'm being sarcastic again, but it says Ecuador earthquake state of emergency declared after at least 246 killed. Now, every time you see that word state of emergency, there should be some alarm bells ringing, because when you see that word in America, that's going to be what? Martial law in America. I'm telling you, they're testing this stuff out ahead of time. If you're not seeing it now, I don't know what to tell you. But it says the death toll from a powerful earthquake that shook Ecuador's northwestern coast soared to 246 Sunday, and hundreds more were wounded, the nation's president said. Ecuador was in a state of emergency Sunday after the magnitude 7.8 earthquake flattened buildings and ravaged towns Saturday just before 7 p.m. local time. It says, thank you to the whole world for solidarity. President Rafael Correa said on Twitter, sounds to me like what New World Order, bring the world together. The tragedy happened, bring the world together, just like what Belgium and Paris all over again. Only this is actually happened, unlike Paris. But let's keep going. Our infinite love to the families of the dead, Correa said on Twitter, while cutting short a trip to Italy to return home. And then it goes on to say more than 2,500 people were injured in the quake, according to a statement from the government. At least 370 buildings were destroyed, and another 151 buildings and 26 schools were affected by the quake, the statement said. Of course, it could be much more than this, because they don't tell us everything they want us to know. But what does it say here? It says Glass said 10,000 military troops and 3,500 police officers have been dispatched to the affected areas, and 600 million in credit was allotted to the emergency. Meanwhile, the Home Ministry said 5 helicopters and over 80 buses were ferrying 4,000 police to the quake zone. And we have our favorite, the Red Cross, on the scene as well. And we have states of emergency declared all over in certain provinces. And it says it was the strongest quake to hit Ecuador since 1979. Oh, but everything's okay, right? Oh, nothing to worry about here, right? Oh my goodness. But what should you be looking out for is this. I'm telling you, they are preparing for the worst. They're getting ready for martial law in America. I'm telling you, they're practicing in strategic locations. They're practicing worldwide for all this stuff to hit America simultaneously. And if you don't believe me now, you'll believe it when it happens, because it's only a matter of time. And like I said, what are the odds that all these earthquakes would just hit at such a time as this? What are the odds? Why now? Why today? Why this week? Those are the types of questions you should be asking yourself. And more importantly, you should be asking yourself, why right now? And what exactly are they getting ready for and preparing for? Like I said, I'm going to keep drilling it through your head that nothing is ever a coincidence. And here I am at Channel News Asia that talks about what? Small eruption on Japan's Mount Aso after earthquake. A small eruption occurred at Mount Aso in southern Japan on Saturday following a strong earthquake in the area, with smoke rising about 100 meters high. And here's a photo right here. And it says a small eruption occurred at Mount Aso in southern Japan on Saturday, April 16th, around 8:30 a.m. local time, following a strong earthquake in the area, with smoke rising about 100 meters high, public broadcaster NHK reported. The Japanese Meteorological Agency kept its alert level at 2 on a scale of 5 for Mount Aso, which has had eruptions in the past. Now, of course, for some of you might say, oh, well, it's had eruptions in the past, so it's okay. Well, it's okay. We don't have to worry. It's had eruptions in the past. What I'm trying to tell you and drill through your head is that they are getting ready for bigger, better things. They're getting ready, and they're testing all this stuff out. They have to test everything before they actually do it. And like I said, why would they have earthquakes going off in Japan, Ecuador, Tonga, Vanuatu, and other places all over the place, and what they call the Ring of Fire? If this isn't symbolic and ringing some serious alarm bells, some serious apocalyptic alarm bells, I suggest you really wake up now and think again. Now, there's one more place I would like to take you before I take you to the very last place, and it's here, the end of the American dream. And it says 5 major earthquakes in 48 hours as a seismologist warns catastrophic mega earthquakes are coming. No, they're not warning about anything. They already know about it because they work with the government, who are the ones responsible for doing this, if they're not the ones responsible too, because they know exactly what they're doing, but they cannot tell you that. Keep the secrets. Don't tell them. But it goes on to say, why is the crust of the earth shaking so violently all of a sudden? Over the past 48 hours, there have been 5 major earthquakes, so-called globally, and one prominent seismologist has declared that catastrophic mega earthquakes could be on the way. In fact, seismologist Roger Bilham of the University of Colorado has made headlines all over the world by warning that current conditions might trigger at least 4 earthquakes greater than 8.0 in magnitude. No, they're planning for that and staging for that. They as in your government, they as in HARP, they as in CERN, they as in your elites. That is exactly what they're doing. But it goes on to say, and I'm just going to read this real quick, that an 8.0 earthquake would be very bad in historic proportions, but they talk about the 6.4 earthquake that struck Japan, as well as the 6.5 earthquake that hit Vanuatu, the 6.9 earthquake that hit Myanmar. And so we see all these earthquakes over Asia, and we see some that are going on with aftershocks in Pakistan, India, and even Nepal, as well as some other ones, as well as volcanoes going off as well. And if you are into biblical prophecy, we see the biblical prophecy is being fulfilled as well. All earthquakes in diverse places, but who's causing it? Who's the one behind it? I'll tell you who's behind it. It's the same people who are behind chemtrails. It's the same people who are behind the Operation Depopulation. It's the same people who are behind the UN. I shouldn't even say people. It's the same entities behind everything else, for we wrestle not against flesh and blood. And I'm just going to leave it there because I want you to see that all of this is planned and staged ahead of time. They know exactly what they're doing. Remember, they caused the problem by causing earthquakes and triggering these earthquakes, and then they offer the reaction, which is, oh my goodness, get in an uproar. Oh my goodness, everything's going wrong. Oh my goodness, here we go again. And then they offer their own solution and created solution to their caused problem. And we see right now that they are testing all over the place. Your military is actively drilling for these Jade Helm drills, as well as other UX drills across America. Why do you think they're doing all these drills? What do you think they're getting ready for? You can even read government documents if you haven't looked at some of my other videos already that talk about your government planning for civil unrest, and that the DHS has even admitted that they're planning for civil unrest and to lock up American citizens and detain them into detention camps, also known as FEMA camps. But this is just one way that they're preparing for it, so that when the real thing does strike, they will be ready to go. Here's the last place I wanted to take you to. Here I am at USGS, which shows a graph of the earthquakes that have been going on. And here I am where you could change it, but I wanted to show you the earthquakes that have been going on in the past week alone. Now, these earthquakes have been going on in the past week at a magnitude of 4.5 or above worldwide. And as you can see, a bulk of them take place in what's known as the Ring of Fire. Why would they deem it the Ring of Fire? Very interesting. And if you look at the list here, you can see that a bunch of them, and the ones in red, occur where in the places that we talked about. So we see one that occurred in Ecuador right there, and it highlights it itself. If we keep going, we see all these earthquakes that have happened in the past week. If we keep going, we see one in Japan. We see another one in Japan, a 5.7 and 7.0. This is, of course, according to USGS in the past week. But if we keep going, we see one in Vanuatu. According to this, it was a 6.4. If we keep going, we see a 6.0 in Uto, Japan. So we see all these earthquakes, and another one in Japan that's red, and we see the 6.9 one that occurred in Burma. So what's up with all these earthquakes? Why at such a time as this? Has the Ring of Fire been unleashed? Oh, you bet it has, and it's only going to get worse from here. Not only that, but if you pay close attention to this, you see that, okay, all this earthquake activity going on over here and over here, but nothing going on right there. Very interesting and suspicious indeed. I'm telling you, they are getting ready for things. But of course, this is magnitude 4.5 plus. If we zoom it to 2.5 plus, which I'm going to do right now, you do see more earthquakes in these areas. See, what a big difference. And you see 333 earthquakes that have occurred as of late Sunday evening, American time, in the past 7 days. Very interesting and suspicious indeed. But not only that, but if I show you all the magnitudes worldwide, of course, this is according to our lovely government, but if I show you the week's earthquakes worldwide, what you will see is even more shocking and disturbing, because you see a whole bunch of activity in the western US, a whole bunch of activity in Alaska. Not only that, but over 1,600 earthquakes have occurred in the past week alone. That should be ringing some serious alarm bells to you, if not. And if it's not, I seriously do not know what to tell you, because I'm telling you, they are getting ready for what? Chaos and destruction. But the question is, are you ready to stand in that evil day? I hope so. Please seek Yahuwah and his true son Yahusha, because as you can see, time is running out. It's only getting worse. If you would like to learn how to prepare for more, please watch my Scriptures Often Ignored and Living Righteously series for more. But this is Truth Unveiled, keeping you updated with the world around you. Shalom. And what else would happen? The quakes also appear to have triggered eruption at Mount Aso, Japan's largest active volcano. A tsunami warning was sounded but lifted a few hours later, and I know there was a tsunami warning in Ecuador as well, which we're going to go over that, as well as Mount Aso as well. So one has to wonder, why is all this occurring at such a time as this? Still think everything's okay? I suggest you wake up and think again. But it goes on to say, why is Japan battered so often by earthquakes? Why hasn't the Mount Aso eruption triggered a tsunami? What are the relationships between Japan's geographic location, earthquakes, and tsunamis? The following report answers some. Truth Unveiled here, and today I have so much to go over with you. I'm going to be talking about the recent earthquakes that have been going on, and the question of the day is, what are they getting ready for? Why so many earthquakes, and why could it potentially trigger tsunamis and volcanic eruptions and other bad things? So that and more to come. But I'm here at Asia Times, and we're going to be discussing Japan and earthquakes, a quick study guide, because what you're going to see are some very interesting things that have been going on. But it says Japan, Ecuador, and Tonga were next in the Ring of Fire, so-called, and it said that the Ring of Fire is here, this imaginary horseshoe-shaped zone that follows the rim of the Pacific Ocean, where many of the world's earthquakes and volcanic eruptions occur. I wonder why, but it says, what is the Pacific Ring of Fire? Called the biggest crash seen on Earth. These boundaries mark the collision between two of the plane's tectonic plates. These plates are pieces of crust that slowly move across the plane surface over millions of years. That's what they want us to believe, but let's keep going. What does it do? It's responsible for the world's biggest earthquakes, the most terrible tsunamis, and some of the worst volcanic eruptions, according to Live Science. Within the Ring of Fire, several tectonic plates, including the Pacific Plate beneath the Pacific Ocean and the Philippine Sea Plate, mash and collide. It is the most active quake belt where tons of earthquakes occur. You're going to see that in a minute. But also what's interesting is that 6 massive quakes in less than 4 days. So Thursday we saw a 6.5 magnitude in Japan, Saturday a 7.3 in Japan, Saturday again at 5.8 in Japan, and then 5.3 in Japan. And then on Sunday we see one in Ecuador, 7.8, which we're going to go over later. And then again in Tonga, a 5.8 as well. But there's a lot they're not telling you about these earthquakes and how they're happening and who is behind them. You're going to find out who just a second. But it says 4 massive earthquakes struck Japan in less than 3 days this week. The strongest measured 7.3 on the Richter scale early Saturday. Massive damage to roads, bridges, and buildings were reported. The death toll by Saturday's end reached 41 as rescuers struggled to reach survivors. Thousands sustained serious injuries, with about 90,000 evacuated from the quake-hit southern regions and admitted to emergency shelters. Warning calls have been issued to brace for more severe tremblers in the coming days.